My name is Walter Greer, and I'm 79 years old. I don't know exactly why I'm recording this. My daughter set up this camera for me about 3 weeks ago, and most nights I just sit in front of it and don't say anything. I just look at it, and then I go to bed. But tonight feels different, maybe because I drove past it again this afternoon. I do that sometimes, more than I should probably. I get in the car, tell myself I'm going to the pharmacy or the hardware store, and somehow I end up on Dellwood Avenue, moving slow, windows up, just looking at it. The house is green now. It was white when we lived there. Whoever owns it painted it green and put one of those little stone borders around the flower bed out front. Eleanor would have hated that border. She always said stone made a yard look like it was already giving up. I smiled when I thought that. Then I didn't. I lived in that house for 11 years, moved in when I was 31, left when I was 42. Those years sit in me differently than any others, not because they were the best years, I'm not sure they were, but because I was most fully myself inside them, and I didn't know it while it was happening. That's the part that stays with me, that I was living the life I would later miss, and I was too busy being restless inside it to feel what it actually was. Eleanor was my wife. We married young. I was 28, she was 26, and we moved into that house on Dellwood the spring after our son Marcus was born. The house needed work. The kitchen floor had soft spots near the refrigerator, and the back bedroom window wouldn't seal right, so every winter you could feel cold air coming through if you pressed your hand against the frame. We used to joke about fixing it. We never did. And I don't know why I remember that window more than almost anything else from those years, but I do. I remember standing in that back bedroom on winter mornings, pressing my hand to the frame, feeling the cold push through, and just accepting it, moving on with the day. I accepted a lot of things like that, things I'd told myself I'd get around to. Marcus grew up in that house. He learned to walk in that hallway, the one that ran from the front door to the kitchen. Short hall, maybe 12 feet, but he walked it like it was a great distance, arms out, face very serious, this absolute concentration in his eyes like the floor might shift on him at any moment. I was there for that. I was there for a lot of things. But I was also somewhere else in my head during most of them, planning, worrying, thinking about the next thing, a promotion that might come through, a bill we were behind on, an argument Eleanor and I had started and not finished. I was physically present in that house for 11 years. I'm not sure how many of those years I was actually there. Eleanor and I weren't unhappy. I want to say that clearly. People hear a story like this and they assume the marriage was failing, that the house holds some dark memory, some rupture they're waiting for me to reveal. It's not like that. We were ordinary, warmly, quietly, sometimes frustratingly ordinary. We loved each other in the way that people do when love has moved out of its early brightness and become something more like furniture, present, useful, occasionally unnoticed. She made coffee every morning, and always made enough for 2, even on the days I left early and wouldn't drink mine. I'd come home and find the second cup still sitting there, cold, on the counter. I used to find that irritating. I would pour it out without thinking about it. I've thought about those cups of coffee more times than I can count since she passed. She passed 8 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the end. We were living in a different house by then,
Smaller, easier to maintain, closer to Marcus and his family. We'd sold the Dellwood house years before. Life had moved the way life moves, one practical decision at a time, and suddenly you're somewhere else entirely. She was 63. I held her hand at the end, and I didn't say what I should have said, because I didn't know yet what that was. I thought I did. I said the things you say, that I loved her, that she was a good woman, that I was glad. But the thing I should have said, the real thing, I hadn't found the words for it yet. I found them about 2 years later, sitting alone in my car on Dellwood Avenue, looking at a green house that used to be white. I should tell you what I was like in those years, not to explain myself, I'm past explaining myself, but because the house doesn't make sense without knowing whom was living inside it. I was ambitious in the way that men of my generation were taught to be ambitious, quietly, relentlessly, without much examination of what we were actually moving toward. I worked in logistics management for a company that moved freight. It's not a glamorous thing to say, but I was good at it, and being good at it mattered to me more than almost anything else in my life during those years. I wanted to be respected at work. I wanted Marcus to be proud of me. I wanted Eleanor to feel secure. Those were real wants, genuine ones. I wasn't performing them, but they required a version of me that was always slightly absent from whatever room I was actually standing in, always calculating, always with one ear turned toward the next problem. Eleanor used to say, very gently, that sometimes she felt like she was talking to the back of me. I thought she was being unfair when she said that. I understand now that she was being precise. There was a Saturday in October. Marcus would have been about 7, when the 3 of us raked leaves in the backyard. The yard on Dellwood was deep. Old oak tree near the back fence that dropped leaves for 6 weeks every fall. It was always more leaves than seemed possible, like the tree was excessive about it. We spent the whole afternoon out there. Marcus kept jumping into the piles before we could bag them. Eleanor kept laughing at him and pretending to be annoyed. At some point, she threw a handful of leaves at me, and I pretended not to think it was funny. And then I threw some back, and then Marcus lost his mind with happiness that his parents were throwing leaves at each other. We stayed outside until it got cold. I don't remember what we talked about. I remember the quality of the light, that particular October light that is gold and thin at the same time, the kind that makes everything look like it's already becoming a memory while you're still standing in it. I remember Eleanor's face when she laughed. I remember thinking briefly that this was a good day. And then I remember going inside and checking my work emails while she made dinner. That's the part I returned to. Not the leaves, not the light. The going inside. The almost without knowing it. Just going inside. There's a specific night I've never told anyone about. It was late, Marcus was asleep, Eleanor was already in bed, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with some papers spread in front of me, work things, nothing that couldn't have waited until Monday. Eleanor came downstairs. She was in her robe. She didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway looking at me. And then she said very quietly, "Do you know what tonight is?" And I didn't. I genuinely didn't know. It was our anniversary, 12 years. I had not forgotten it maliciously. There was no cruelty in it. It had simply not registered. The day had passed through me like water through a screen. She didn't cry. That was the thing. She just looked at me for a long moment, and then she said, "Okay, Walter," and she went back upstairs. OK, Walter. I've never been able to fully explain what those two words carried. Not anger, not devastation, just something quieter than both of those. Something that sounded like a woman adjusting her understanding of her life. I went up after her. I apologized. She said it was fine. I believe she meant it. But something had been said in that kitchen that couldn't be unsaid, even though the words themselves were almost nothing. We didn't talk about it again, and I didn't change. I told myself I would, the way you tell yourself in the dark when you're briefly ashamed and the shame feels like intention. But by the following week I was the same man at the same table with the same papers. We sold the Dellwood house in 2000.